I got home from a doctor's appointment, nothing dramatic, just a routine checkup, and I remember thinking about grabbing a late lunch, maybe taking it easy for the rest of the day, and then I turned the corner onto my street and just stopped, like full brake, engine still running, staring straight ahead, because there was no way I was seeing this right. My driveway, my actual driveway, was gone. Not blocked, not partially obstructed, I mean gone, buried under a literal mountain of gravel, orange cones, and two pieces of construction equipment that looked like they'd been dropped there permanently. There were workers in reflective vests moving around like this was just another Tuesday, like nobody's life was being completely inconvenienced. And right there, zip-tied to my mailbox, was a bright, cheerful notice. You know the kind, overly friendly font, borderline passive-aggressive tone, from the HOA. Neighborhood Enhancement Initiative in progress. Temporary access restrictions may apply. Estimated completion, 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you for your patience. Patience? Yeah, sure. I couldn't even pull into my own property. My car was sitting halfway in the street while these guys were literally pouring concrete across the only entrance to my home. I got out, walked up to one of the workers, the foreman, I assume, guy with a clipboard, sunglasses, the whole I don't get paid to care vibe, and I asked him, as calmly as I could, "Hey, what exactly is going on here?" He didn't even look surprised, didn't apologize, didn't hesitate, just shrugged and said, "HOA job. You gotta take it up with them. We just follow the plans." That was it. No explanation, no warning, just, not my problem. So I stepped back, looked around, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't some quick repair job. This was a full-blown sidewalk extension project. They were widening the walkway, adding decorative edges, probably some fancy landscaping later. You know, the kind of thing that looks great in a brochure, but completely ignores the fact that people actually live here. And somehow, in all their planning, they decided my driveway was optional. I pulled out my phone and called Nolan Pierce, vice president of the HOA, self-appointed king of community improvement. The guy picked up on the second ring, and I swear, before I even finished explaining the situation, I could already hear it in his voice. That tone, you know? That polished, dismissive, you're overreacting tone. "It's temporary," he said. "You can park on the street for a few weeks. It's a small sacrifice for the benefit of the entire neighborhood." A small sacrifice, right? I told him they had blocked access to private property, that I had zero notice beyond a piece of paper taped to my mailbox, and he actually laughed. Not a chuckle, not awkward, a full laugh. "Relax," he said. "You'll thank us when your property value goes up." That right there, that was the moment something shifted. Because this wasn't just inconvenience anymore. This was control. This was someone deciding, without asking, that their vision mattered more than my rights. That night, I couldn't let it go. I walked back out to the site after the crew had packed up, just me and the quiet hum of streetlights. And when things are quiet, you notice details, things you miss during the day. I followed the line of fresh concrete, traced where it was going, where it was connecting, and then I saw it. A storm drain. Not just any drain, the main one. The only one servicing the entire cul-de-sac. And what really caught my attention wasn't the drain itself, it was where it led. Because I'd seen that path before. Years ago, my dad used to work in civil engineering, and I still had some of his old survey maps stored away. Back when I bought the house, we went over them together. He walked me through everything, property lines, easements, drainage systems, stuff most people never think about. And standing there, looking at that drain half covered by their beautiful new sidewalk, I felt this slow, creeping realization settle in. They had no idea what they were doing. So I went back inside, dug through my storage boxes, and found the documents. Took a minute, old folders, dust everywhere, but when I finally laid them out on the table and started comparing the layout to what I saw outside, yeah, there it was. The entire drainage system for the neighborhood ran through a culvert that passed directly under my backyard. And more importantly, there was a recorded easement, a legal one, that clearly stated any construction within a certain radius of that main line required approval. Not optional, required. And nobody had contacted me. Not once. I sat there for a while, just staring at those papers, replaying Nolan's voice in my head. Small sacrifice, property value, relax. It wasn't just arrogance, it was negligence dressed up as authority. The next morning, I made a call to the county engineering office. Didn't raise my voice, didn't exaggerate, Just laid out the facts: location, construction, potential interference with a primary drainage line. The woman on the other end got quiet for a second, asked a few follow-up questions, and then said, "We'll send someone out today." And they did. Couple hours later, a county inspector shows up, clipboard in hand, walks the site, checks the plans, takes measurements, and you could see it on his face, that subtle shift from neutral to concerned. He didn't say much to me directly, but he spoke to the crew, made a phone call, and by early afternoon, everything stopped. Work order suspended. Immediate halt. Now you'd think that would be enough, right? Problem solved. Driveway cleared. Lesson learned. Yeah, that's what I thought too, for about 5 minutes. Because then I remembered Nolan's laugh. And something about that stuck with me. Not just what he said, but how he said it. Like this was all beneath him. Like I didn't have a say in what happened to my own property. So I started thinking, not emotionally, not impulsively, strategically. If they wanted to treat this like a game, fine. I just needed to understand the rules better than they did. And the more I looked at those survey maps, the clearer the picture became. Because that storm drain, that wasn't just a feature. It was a dependency. Everything flowed through it. And if something were to interrupt that flow, even temporarily, well, let's just say the entire neighborhood would feel it. All right, before we go any further into what happened next, I want to pause right here for a second, because this is where things stop being just a story and start turning into something a lot more interesting. A mix of law, psychology, and power dynamics. All right, quick pause, because what's happening here isn't just some petty neighborhood drama. This is actually a pretty textbook example of how HOA power can get distorted. According to standard procedure, an HOA does have the authority to approve community improvement projects, sidewalks, landscaping, all that stuff. But that authority isn't unlimited. The moment a project interferes with private property access or touches a regulated utility system like drainage, it crosses into a completely different legal category. From a legal perspective, what they did was risky, not just inconsiderate, but potentially a violation of easement law. Easements are basically shared rights over land use, and you don't get to alter them without proper approval, especially when it affects infrastructure that multiple homes depend on. Now here's where it gets interesting psychologically. This is a psychological trap a lot of HOA boards fall into. When a group of people operates with small amounts of authority, especially in a closed environment like a neighborhood, they start to equate community benefit with we can override individual inconvenience. It creates this illusion of moral high ground, like they're justified no matter what. And once someone like Nolan starts dismissing concerns instead of addressing them, that's usually a sign they've already committed to the decision emotionally, not rationally. And that's exactly the moment when conflict stops being about the project and starts being about control. So yeah, once that stop work order hit, everything froze. Machines idle, cones still up, half-poured concrete sitting there like a bad decision that finally got called out. You'd think that would have been the moment the HOA backed off, maybe sent an apology, maybe tried to smooth things over. But no. Silence. No call from Nolan, no message, nothing. Just quiet. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. Because when someone messes up and immediately tries to fix it, that's one thing. But when they go quiet, that usually means they're not done, they're just regrouping. And that's when I made my move. Now let me be clear, I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't cut corners. I didn't even rush it. I did it properly. Permits, paperwork, inspections, the whole 9 yards. Because if you're going to play this kind of game, you don't win by being louder, you win by being right. I contacted a local contractor, small crew, reliable guys, explained the situation, showed them the survey maps, the easement details, the drainage layout. At first, they looked at me like, "You sure you want to do this?" And I just nodded. Completely within my property line, I said. And fully permitted. That was all they needed. By that afternoon, they were on site. Quiet, efficient, no drama. They measured out the area near the storm drain inlet, the exact point where the water entered the culvert that ran under my backyard, and started setting up forms. Rebar, framing, everything precise. Now here's the part most people wouldn't notice unless they knew what they were looking at. I wasn't blocking the system permanently. I wasn't destroying anything. I was modifying the inlet, legally, in a way that redirected flow temporarily. Still compliant. Still within code. But functionally, yeah, it changed things. By early evening, The concrete was poured. Smooth, solid, intentional. And just like that, the neighborhood's entire drainage system had a new bottleneck. I stood there for a minute after the crew left, just looking at it. No anger, no excitement, just a kind of calm clarity. Because now, the system was balanced again. They had blocked my access, and now something was blocking theirs. All it needed was a little rain, and we didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, the sky turned gray, one of those slow-building storms, the kind where the air feels heavy before anything even starts. I remember sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the clouds roll in, thinking, this is either going to prove a point or blow up in my face. Then the rain came. At first, it was light, just a steady drizzle. Nothing dramatic. Water hitting pavement, running along the edges of the street, doing what it's supposed to do. But then it picked up. Heavier. Louder. The kind of rain that tests every system it touches. And that's when things started to change. I noticed it first near the curb, water pooling where it normally wouldn't. Not draining as fast. Then it spread. Slowly at first, then faster. The street began to glisten, then reflect, then hold. Within an hour, it wasn't just puddles anymore. It was accumulation. Water creeping up the sides of tires, flowing toward driveways, pressing against garage doors. And remember, this was a cul-de-sac. No through flow. Everything that came in had one way out. And that way was restricted. I stood up, walked down the steps, and just watched. Not interfering, not celebrating, just observing. Because this was the system reacting. And systems don't care about intentions. They respond to structure. By the time the rain hit its peak, the entire street looked like a shallow lake. Cars were sitting axle deep in murky water, reflections of porch lights shimmering across the surface. People started coming out of their houses, confused at first, then concerned, then panicked. You could hear it in their voices. What's going on? Why isn't it draining? Call someone. And then, inevitably, someone connected the dots. Because it didn't take long for people to notice where the water was backing up and where it wasn't going. About 20 minutes later, I saw him. Nolan, coming down the street, shoes already soaked, pants rolled up, moving fast but trying not to look like he was rushing. That same guy who laughed on the phone a few days ago? Yeah, completely different energy now. He reached my front yard, stepped onto the walkway, and for a second, just stood there catching his breath. You need to fix this, he said. No greeting. No preamble. Just straight to it. I leaned against the porch railing, took a sip of my coffee, and looked past him at the street behind. Water still rising, neighbors gathering, phones out, voices getting louder. I'd love to help, I said calmly. But my driveway's still blocked. Can't exactly get equipment back there, can I? He blinked. Just once. Like the thought hadn't even crossed his mind. This isn't the same thing, he snapped. This is affecting the entire neighborhood. And there it was. That shift. From dismissal to urgency. From control to dependence. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. Funny how that works. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, trying a different angle. Look, whatever this is, we can sort it out later. Right now, people's homes are at risk. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. Just met his eyes and said, mine was too. That hit. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But enough. Because for the first time, he didn't have a quick response. Instead, he pulled out his phone, stepped aside, and started making calls, urgent ones. I could hear bits and pieces. County, inspection, liability. We need this resolved. But here's the thing. The county already knew. The inspector who issued the stop work order? Yeah, he had reviewed my permit earlier that day. Signed off on it. Documented. Filed. Everything I had done was clean. By the next morning, the situation had escalated. The rain had slowed, but the water hadn't fully drained. Damage was starting to show, garage interiors soaked, landscaping ruined, a couple of basements taking on water. Insurance adjusters were being called. Questions were being asked. And suddenly, the HOA, the same group that told me to relax, was in full crisis mode. They scheduled an emergency meeting that afternoon. Not at the clubhouse. Couldn't. It was partially flooded, but at the local library. I showed up. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see it. The room was tense. People talking over each other, papers being passed around, phones buzzing nonstop. And at the front, Nolan, no longer confident, no longer composed, just trying to hold things together. When he saw me walk in, the room shifted. Conversations quieted. Attention moved. He cleared his throat. "We're prepared to resolve the access issue immediately," he said, choosing his words carefully now. "Your driveway will be cleared today. We'll also cover any inconvenience this has caused." Inconvenience. I almost smiled, because now we were negotiating. And negotiation only happens when both sides have leverage. I took a step forward. "That's a start," I said. "But we're past inconvenience." He hesitated. "What are you asking?" I didn't rush it. Let the silence sit for a second, long enough for everyone in the room to feel it. "Full restitution," I said. 15,000. For property impact, loss of access, and the time I've had to spend dealing with something that should have been handled properly from the beginning. Murmurs. Not outrage, not exactly. More like realization. Because they knew. They knew this didn't start with me. Nolan looked around the room, weighing options, calculating. You could almost see the numbers running through his head: cost of damage, potential lawsuits, insurance complications, versus a clean, immediate resolution. It took maybe 10 seconds. Then he nodded. "We'll issue the payment today." Just like that. No argument. No pushback. Because the situation had flipped. Completely. By that evening, my driveway was clear. Equipment moved, debris gone, access restored like it should have been from the start. And once that was done, I kept my end of the equation. Had the crew come back, remove the modification, reopen the flow. And slowly, the water receded. Street returning to normal, cars drying off, people stepping outside again, quieter now, more aware. Like something had shifted. And maybe it had. Because this was never really about the sidewalk. It was about boundaries. About what happens when someone assumes they can make decisions for you, without you. And what it takes to remind them otherwise. All right. So that's how it all played out. But the real value in this story isn't just the ending. It's what we can take from it. The patterns, the mistakes, the decisions that led here. So yeah, that's the story. Wild situation, a little dramatic, maybe even a bit satisfying depending on how you look at it. But here's the thing. If you strip away the rain, the concrete, the HOA politics, what's left is something a lot more universal. This wasn't really about a driveway. It wasn't even about a sidewalk. It was about how quickly people justify overstepping when they believe they're acting for the greater good. And that's where it gets interesting. Because according to standard procedure, systems like HOAs are supposed to exist to maintain order, protect property values, and create some level of shared structure in a neighborhood. On paper, that sounds reasonable. In practice, it depends entirely on the people running it. And when those people start prioritizing vision over communication, efficiency over consent, that's when friction turns into conflict. The lesson here is, small decisions made without transparency don't stay small. They stack. They ripple. And eventually, they hit someone in a way that forces a response. Now, from a legal perspective, what saved me in this situation wasn't luck, it was documentation. Easements, permits, approvals. All the boring stuff most homeowners never think about until it's too late. But those details, that's where the real power sits. Because when everything is properly recorded, when you understand the boundaries of your property and the systems connected to it, you're not just reacting anymore. You're operating with clarity. And clarity changes how you move. But there's another layer here, and this one's more psychological. This is a psychological trap that shows up in a lot of group dynamics. When people operate inside a committee, especially one with limited oversight, they start reinforcing each other's assumptions. One person says, "This will improve the neighborhood." Another agrees, and suddenly dissent feels unnecessary, even inconvenient. So instead of questioning the plan, they double down on it. And when someone outside that loop pushes back, someone like me in this case, the first instinct isn't to listen. It's to minimize, dismiss, reframe the issue as overreaction. Relax. It's temporary. You'll benefit from this. Sound familiar? That's not problem solving. That's control disguised as reassurance. And the moment that happens, the conversation shifts. It's no longer about the project. It's about authority. Who gets to decide? Who gets ignored? Now here's where I'm going to be real with you. What I did. It worked. But it wasn't the easiest path. It took time, planning, risk. And it could have gone very differently if I hadn't done things by the book. If I skipped permits, if I acted emotionally instead of strategically, I probably would have been the one dealing with fines, not them. So this isn't a get revenge story. Not really. It's a understand the system before you challenge it story. Because once you understand how things actually function, legally, structurally, even psychologically, you don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to escalate blindly. You can respond in a way that's precise, controlled, effective. And yeah, sometimes that response reveals consequences people didn't anticipate. But those consequences, they don't come out of nowhere. They're built into the system. Now, if you're living in an HOA, or even just dealing with shared property rules, here's something to think about. Before signing anything, before agreeing to any community improvements, ask questions. Not aggressive ones, just clear ones. What's the scope? Who approved it? Does it affect access, utilities, easements? Because once something is built, undone becomes a lot harder than prevented. And if you ever find yourself on the other side, part of a board, part of a decision-making group, remember this. Authority isn't about pushing things through. It's about knowing when to pause, when to check, when to ask the one person who might be affected the most. Because ignoring that one person, that's usually where the story starts. And stories like this, they don't stay quiet. So yeah, that's my experience. I'm curious what you think. Was this justified? Would you have handled it differently? Or do you think the HOA had a point in the beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd expect. And if you enjoy stories that mix real-life situations with a little strategy, a little psychology, maybe even a lesson or two along the way, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. Because sometimes, the most interesting battles aren't the loud ones. They're the ones fought quietly, with paperwork, timing, and just enough rain.